Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of TCG Talk, back today with another video. And in today's video, with all the Prism discourse and Prism discussion the last couple weeks, I wanted to give my take on how to approach the matchup from the Assassin class. Hopefully I can give you some tech cards that'll help you both as a Uziri and an Arachne player, just give you some general concepts. Some of these cards are very obvious, some are not, and we'll also talk about some cards that are not featured in the list. But overall, I wanted to just try to give my thoughts to help maybe a newer Assassin player or even an intermediate Assassin player that feels a little bit daunting on the matchup, some things that maybe shore it up and maybe help. So we'll get right into it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. Hopefully you enjoy your stay. If you're a long-standing supporter, thank you so much as always. Feel free to check out the Discord down below. Have access to a great community. Spoiler season's coming up. Hopefully we get one. That'd be really cool. We'll have to see. But there's been a lot of discussion on the new set in there as well as the meta. Definitely check that out. And then if you want to potentially support the channel in a different way, that'd be amazing. Anything I get on the channel memberships goes back into the channel, whether it's product for giveaways or, you know, new equipment, what have you, or getting to events. So yeah, we'll get right into it. But when it comes to Prism, I would say for Assassin specifically, into a normal Prism, because I'm not going to say a bad Prism, that sounds negative, into a Prism that maybe they haven't been on Prism since the OG Prism days, right? Maybe they're new to the class, or they've been playing Prism maybe for a couple months, maybe a month or two. I'd say the matchup is 60-40 in favor of Prism. That'd be like my arbitrary put a number on it thing. When it comes to a skilled Prism, someone who's maybe been playing Prism since the OG Prism days, I would say that matchup can skew like 70-30. The thing about Assassin, though, is if you can keep the pressure up, if you can use your black text properly, if you can get some silver, if you can, you know, just utilize your daggers properly to really hurt them if they don't have spectral shields up and threaten their angels, you can do some crazy things and you can make it really close and you can win some games even against Prism. So both the Iris and the lag build, even though Iris build is worse. So I'm gonna give a couple cards here that hopefully help, and I'll try to talk through both Assassins, but I'm kind of just talking Assassin in general. Before I look at them though, the one card that's not on here while it's on my brain is Hack to Reality. I don't think that's a bad card per se. It's just a yellow 1-cost 2 block that only pumps your attack by 2. So you have to hold 2 cards to do it off Tunic, and it just becomes like your attack in Arachne will become a 2-card 6 that they can just double block and then go about their day. I just don't think it's quite worth it in Assassin. I think it's more useful in classes that can go wide and threaten a lot of things. So if you don't see that here, that's why. But bring it up, the first package of cards as we pull up Codex Blood Rot here is the Blood Rot package. Some of these cards are in like 50-50 in lists. Some of these cards have actually made their way out of lists for the most part, and some of them are staples. But I want to go through each of them. I think with Blood Rot Pox, the one good thing about against Prism that can be a little bit hard, not good thing, but the thing that can be a little hard is sometimes if you're just trying to block out their heralds, may fatigue them a little bit, you know, really try to set up, they'll just get soul through other means, right? Whether it's Merciful Retribution, you pop in something, whether it's Soul Shield, whether it's what have you, right? They'll even Halo, right? They'll get something in soul that way. There's ways they're going to get in soul, and they're eventually going to build to 2 or 3 soul, and then they're going to flip Erudition and try to pop off. Well, one thing you can try to do to be a little more proactive is the Blood Rots in general. So Codex of Blood Rot, I think, is a really good card. I think you can arsenal this card, to be completely honest, and block 3, block with 3 cards, maybe arsenal this, or block with 2 cards, swing something, arsenal this, whatever the case may be. Or you could block with 2 cards, play this, put down your 0 for 4 or whatever, and then play that. But what it does is it creates a Blood Rot Pox under their control automatically. And what that does, Blood Rot in general, I think against Prism, is it really slows down what they're trying to do to you. Especially if they're not on the Iris plan, because they want to flip, right? They want to get these angels out. They want to put you in a really weird spot where they can just go the races. And Blood Rot Pox basically tells that Prism, like, if you want to stop this, because most of their deck is yellows, a lot of it is, then you have to give me 2 cards on your next turn at the end of your turn, which means you only can play a 2-card hand maximum, right? Maybe if they already have Erudition up, then they could potentially, play through it, but it's a little bit difficult, right? You're going to slow them down at worst, and at best, you're going to tell a Prism that they can't flip on their next turn, right? So Codex of Blood Rot, I think, is a really good inclusion. It's like 50-50 in lists right now. Spreading Plague is really good as well. You're starting to see that almost be a staple in list. This one is a little tricky because your opponent has to interact with you. and there is sometimes a good chance, depending on your attack and depending what Prism's board state looks like, they may not interact with you. So be careful on this one in the Prism matchup. I think that honestly this is the weakest of the Blood Rots in the Prism. That's just my opinion. If they don't already have an Angel up, they're not going to block anything likely, in my opinion. Or if they do, it's very, value based. So, and you have to hold a card even off Tunic. You have to hold an extra card to play this. So it's a little bit risky, right? But it's still very good. Spike with Blood Rot is the one. This is specifically for Uziri more so than Arachne. The first 2 Arachne can run both of these, in my opinion. I think running a 2 of this, if you really are trying to tech into Prism, might be worth it in Arachne. And running a 1 or 2 of them on the side on this might be worth in Arachne, and Uziri can easily run both of those. But for this card specifically in Uziri, I think this card needs to come back. When you play this card on like a 1 power backstab, right, and they say no blocks, right, because they're like, I don't care, I'm gonna see what you flip into first and maybe I'll flip, whatever the case may be. Or you play it on even a 3 power infiltrate, and they're like, all right, I don't care. And maybe this is an arsenal, so they're like, okay, you can't flip, like, I don't care. You activate Tunic, play this, play Spike with Blood Rot, all of a sudden you just dealt 6 damage to him and you gave him a Blood Rot token, which is very, very good. I think this is worth exploring back. It used to be in the old Ben Dodd list, or maybe not in the old Ben Dodd list, but the old Sam Dando list back when he was running that more red line, like aggro version of Uziri. And I think if you really care about the Prism matchup, I think this is worth it at a 2 of. I really do. So that's just my opinion. And then finally, Red Infect. Maybe put that back in. A lot of people have been going to Red Infiltrate, which isn't bad. But if in a heavy Prism meta, you might want to have Red Infects, because this tells Prism, like, I have to care about this attack somewhat if I want to flip next turn. So they have to give you at least 1 card, and then you can flip right into something else. So these last 2 cards are mainly for Uziri. The first 2 can be for Uziri and Arachne, but I think the Blood Rot Pox package in general is very, very strong right now against Prism. The next one is Poppers. These are the more obvious ones, but it's worth noting, like, the 7 is the new 6. I think if you want to tech into Prism, you need to have a playset of 7 powers in your list, maybe 2, but 1 definitely. Fyendal's Fighting, the 2 best in my opinion for Assassins specifically are Fyendal's Fighting Spirit. You gain a life. It's like a pseudo block 3. Also allows you Raging Onslaught if you want the 3 block, Red Raging Onslaught. I think both of these are very, very good, and I think they're kind of needed. All right. The first time you try to block with a 6, depending on board state and game state and all that other stuff, Prism might just try to say F you and activate Halo. Go get Triumph and tell your Popper it doesn't matter anymore. Now you can still react with a D-React, which is nice. However, these 2, I think, especially Fyendal's Fighting Spirit Red, I think is really smart. The other 2 6 powers I think are really good right now. The first 2 were for Arachne or Uziri. I think this one's also really good for Arachne or Uziri. Down Dirty, it sounds obvious, but a lot of people have been off of it. And the reason I like this specifically in Uziri for the Prism matchup is sometimes just because of blocks, like, you don't have a choice and you just have to arsenal a 6 power unless you want to IP yourself. And that is, like, so crappy against Prism, right? Maybe you draw into a hand of, Red Fyendal's Fighting Spirit, which happens, shake down, a Sink Below, or a Shred, let's say a Shred, and Down Dirty. So you draw into like 3 poppers, which anyone who's played Assassin against Prism more than like 10 times knows that happens sometimes, especially in Uziri. Maybe you pop twice and because they've already activated Halo, and you're stuck with a Shred and a Down Dirty, right? You can arsenal this card and not feel bad about it. Whereas if this was a Command and Conquer or a Shakedown or something like that, like, yes, you can attack with it, but arsenaling your 6 powers feels really bad. So I think this one's definitely worth putting in. The last one is Humble, just because this specifically more for Uziri than Arachne, but Arachne can run this in the side because it's fantastic right now. This card's so good because it's good in the defensive portion where you can just use it as a popper, but if you want poppers that also are good offensively, because, right, like, let's be honest, Red Raging Onslaught and Red Fyendal's Fighting Spirit aren't going to get you a whole lot on offense, right? Other than the power, maybe gain a life, and Down Dirty. But Humble will, right? Especially in Uziri, like, being able to turn off Prism's hero ability, really nice. Like, play us off of Isolate, play a Humble, and then all of a sudden, if they can't prevent it or anything like that, you're off to the races as far as, like, okay, next turn they can't go get Figments. That feels really good, right? So there's definitely ways of doing it. The 2 blocks a little risky, but in the Prism matchup, like you're just carrying as it's a popper more so than what it blocks for. So being a 2-block isn't as big of a deal because if they triumph it or minus it, you can always minus its power, you can always just de-react and potentially still block it out. Then we have some go again stuff. So I think Hurl came out of list because Dromai went away, but I think it needs to come back in. The card is a 0 for 3, right? It threatens, it takes a card out of their hand. It potentially kills angels. It does a whole lot, right? It helps you go a little bit wider. But what I like about it is certain times, like I don't care what you say, there's certain times you have to block with freaking flick knives. It just is. You have to block with it. So you can't use that flick ability that you want to use. Hurl allows you to get a pseudo flick ability, right? Being able to pay that additional 1 to then flick a dagger and potentially pop an angel is very, very useful. I think it's still worth it if you have that go wide package. This is definitely more of a Uziri card. A lot of these are more Uziri because Arachne into Prism just feels bad. But Uziri can use this a little bit better. I think it's not worth taking it out of list quite yet, especially if you're trying to tech for Prism, but that's just my opinion. And then finally, looking for a scrap. This one's the obvious one. I don't particularly like this card in Uziri. Honestly, I feel like you have to block with your swaps or with your blues a little bit too much in order to make this card worth it. But in against Prism, you need that go again engine. You need Enlightened Strikes, looking for scraps, hurls, you know, what have you, in order to make this better. So I think that's very, very good. But yeah, some cards that are not included. Hack to Reality is one. I don't think it's quite worth it personally. I know people are talking about it, but just don't think it's worth it. Yeah, Assassin overall, like you have to play a little bit of proactive game plan. Try to disrupt them. And sometimes it's not always the big attacks. Sometimes it's not the shakedowns or the surgicals or what have you, right? Being able to play little like annoyances that really stunt their turns can make the difference, right? So hopefully it's helped a little bit. If it didn't, let me know. If it did, let me know. Trying to at least make it a little... It's still a rough matchup. It's still an uphill battle, but it's a winnable one if you are playing correctly. And the Prism... The thing about Prism and Assassin is even though it is heavily favored, they're like 1 or 2 mess-ups away. 1 mess-up away, like really bad. 1 miscalculation or 1 hand of non-blocks with no angels up to really get hurt. So it all depends. Hopefully it's helped. If you like this type of content, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. If not me, it's totally fine. Leave a like, comment, subscribe on someone else's video so we can get more people watching this game. And I'll see y'all next time on TCG Talk.